Hi there. I'm back again. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. We were on chapter 1, and as always, the first chapter in a book is always the longest because it introduces the entire setting and most of the main characters, um, and just kind of the storyline gives you some history and some background of what the story is about. So I'm going to read like the last sentence of the last video and we'll pick up from there and hopefully I'll be able to finish chapter 1 today. It's rather long, like I said, and I didn't get very far in it because I think I read the preface before, but anyway, we will get through as much as possible today. Oh my word. And if you'll notice, the sun will be going in and out. You will need, I will probably try and make a copy of this, of page, I can't read it here, page 25, um, in this book. It gives a chart of the, property of the Board of Education. So we're going to find out. We're going to find out what that's all about. And yeah, this is really a long chapter. There are 31 pages in this chapter, and I'm on page 8, or page 7. So we'll see how far we get today. The sun will be going in and out. It's a very bright, sunshiny day here. When I first turned the video on, it was very bright and sunshiny, and now it's gone dark. So let me turn on my lamp here, and then we will get started. 1 second. I'm going to turn on the lamp so at least we'll have some some stable lighting. 1 second. Whoop. There, that should do. Now you can see me better. Not that it's important that you see me. The important thing is the story, okay? All right, so the last sentence of the last part of the last video. That was why Papa had gone to work on the railroad. In 1930, the price of cotton dropped. And so in the spring of 1931, Papa set out looking for work, going as far north as Memphis and as far south as the Delta country. He had gone west, too, into Louisiana. It was there he found work laying track for the railroad. He worked the remainder of the year away from us, not returning until the deep winter when the ground was cold and barren. The following spring, after the planting was finished, he did the same. Now it was 1933, and Papa was again in Louisiana laying track. I asked him once why he had to go away, why the land was so important. He took my hand and said in his quiet way, "Look out there, Cassie girl. All that belongs to you. You ain't never had to live on nobody's place but your own. And as long as I live and the family survives, you'll never have to. That's important. You may not understand that now, but one day you will. Then you'll see." I looked at Papa strangely when he said that, for I knew that all the land did not belong to me. Some of it belonged to Stacy, Christopher John, and Little Man, not to mention the part that belonged to Big Ma, Mama, and Uncle Hammer, Papa's older brother who lived in Chicago. But Papa never divided the land in his mind. It was simply Logan land. For it he would work the long, hot summer pounding steel. Mama would teach and run the farm. Big Ma, in her 60s, would work like a woman of 20 in the fields and keep the house. and the boys and I would wear threadbare clothing washed to dishwasher watercolor. But always the taxes and the mortgage would be paid. Papa said that one day I would understand. I wondered. When the fields ended and the Granger forest fanned both sides of the road with long overhanging branches, a tall, emaciated-looking boy popped suddenly from a forest trail and swung a thin arm around Stacy. It was T.J. Avery. His younger brother Claude emerged a moment later, smiling weakly as if it pained him to do so. Neither boy had on shoes, and their Sunday clothing, patched and worn, hung loosely upon their frail frames. The Avery family sharecropped on Granger land. "Well," said T.J., jauntily swinging into step with Stacy, "here we go again, starting another school year." "Yeah," sighed Stacy. "Oh, man, don't look so down," T.J. said cheerfully. "Your mamma's really one great teacher. I should know." He certainly should. He had failed Mama's class last year and was now returning for the second try. "Shoot, you can say that!" exclaimed Stacy. "You don't have to spend all day in a classroom with your mama." "Look on the bright side," said T.J. "Just think of the advantage you've got. You'll be learning all sorts of stuff for the rest of us." He smiled slyly. "Like what's on all them tests?" Stacy thrust T.J.'s arm from his shoulders. "If that's what you think, you don't know Mama." "Ain't no need getting mad," T.J. replied, undaunted. "Just an idea." He was quiet for a moment and then announced, "I bet you I could give y'all an earful about that burning last night." "Burning? What burning?" asked Stacy. "Man, don't y'all know nothing? The berries burning. I thought y'all's grandmother went over there last night to see about them." Of course we knew that Big Ma had gone to a sick house last night. She was good at medicines, and people often called her instead of a doctor when they were sick. But we didn't know anything about any burnings, and I certainly didn't know anything about any berries either. "What berry he talking about, Stacy?" I asked. "I don't know no berries." "They live way over on the other side of Smellings Creek. They come up to church sometimes," said Stacy absently. Then he turned back to T.J. "Mr. Lanier come by real late and got Big Ma. Said Mr. Barry was low sick and needed her help to nurse him. But he ain't said nothing about no burning." "He's low sick, all right, 'cause he got burnt near to death. Him and his two nephews. And you know who done it?" "Who?" Stacy and I asked together. "Well, since y'all don't seem to know nothing," said T.J. in his usual sickening way of nursing a tidbit of information to death, "maybe I ought to not tell y'all. It might hurt y'all's little ears." "Ah, boy," I said, "don't start that mess again." I didn't like T.J. very much, and his stalling around didn't help. "Come on, T.J.," said Stacy. "Out with it." "Well," T.J. murmured, then grew silent as if considering whether or not he should talk. We reached the first of two crossroads and turned north. Another mile we would approach the second crossroads and turn east again. Finally T.J. said, "Okay, see, them berries burning wasn't no accident. Some white men took a match to 'em." "You mean just lit 'em up like a piece of wood?" stammered Christopher John, his eyes growing big with disbelief. "But why?" asked Stacy. T.J. shrugged. "I don't know why. Just know they done it, that's all." "How you know?" I questioned suspiciously. He smiled smugly. "'Cause your mama come down on her way to school and talked to my mama about it." "She did?" "Yeah, and you should have seen the way she looked when she come out of that house." How'd she look? Inquired Little Man, interested enough to glance up from the road for the first time. TJ looked around grimly and whispered, like. He waited a moment for his words to be appropriately shocking, but the effect was spoiled by a Little Man who asked lightly, what does death look like? TJ turned in annoyance. Don't you know nothing? Well, what does it look like? Little Man demanded to know. He didn't like TJ either. Like my grandfather just looked just before they buried him, TJ described all knowingly. Oh, replied Little Man, losing interest and concentrating on the road again. I tell you, Stacy Man, said TJ morosely, shaking his head. Sometimes I just don't know about that family of yours. Stacy pulled back, considering whether or not TJ's words were offensive. But TJ immediately erased the question by continuing amiably. Don't get me wrong, Stacy. They some swell kids, but that Cassie about got me whooped this morning. Good, I said. Now how'd she do that? Stacy laughed. You wouldn't be laughing if it had happened to you. She up and told your mama about me going up to that Wallace store dancing room, and Miss Logan told mama. He eyed me disdainfully and went on. But don't worry, I got out of it, though. When Mama asked me about it, I just said old Claude was always sneaking up there to get some of that free candy Mr. Caleb give out sometimes, and I had to go get him, 'cause I knowed good and well she didn't want us up there. Boy, did he get it. TJ laughed. Mama about wore him out. I stared at quiet Claude. You let him do that? I exclaimed. But Claude only smiled in that sickly way of his, and I knew that he had. He was more afraid of TJ than his mother. Again Little Man glanced up, and I could see his dislike for TJ growing. Friendly Christopher John glared at TJ, and putting his short arm around Claude's shoulder, said, Come on, Claude, let's go on ahead. Then he and Claude hurried up the road away from TJ. Stacy, who generally overlooked TJ's underhanded stunts, shook his head. That was dirty. Well, what'd you expect me to do? I couldn't let her think I was going up there 'cause I liked to, could I? She'd have killed me. And good riddance, I thought, promising myself that if he ever pulled anything like that on me, I'd knock his block off. We were nearing the second crossroads where deep gullies lined both sides of the road, and the dense forest crept to the very edges of high, jagged, clay-walled banks. Suddenly Stacy turned. Quick! He cried. Off the road! Without another word, all of us but Little Man scrambled up the steep right bank into the forest. Get up here, man! Stacy ordered, but Little Man only gazed at the ragged red bank sparsely covered with scraggly brown briars and kept on walking. Come on, do like I say! But I'll get my clothes dirty, protested Little Man. You're going to get them a whole lot dirtier. You stay down there. Look! Little Man turned around and watched saucer-eyed as a bus bore down on him, spewing clouds of red dust like a huge yellow dragon breathing fire. Little Man headed toward the bank, but it was too steep. He ran frantically along the road looking for a foothold, and finding one, hopped onto the bank, but not before the bus had sped past, enveloping him in a scarlet haze, while laughing white faces pressed against the bus windows. Little Man shook a threatening fist into the thick air and then looked dismally down at himself. Well, old Little Man done got his Sunday clothes dirty, TJ laughed as we jumped down from the bank. Angry tears welled in Little Man's eyes, but he quickly brushed them away before TJ could see them. Oh, shut up, TJ, Stacy snapped. Yeah, shut up, TJ, I echoed. Come on, man, Stacy said, and next time do like I tell you. Little man hopped down from the bank. How's come they did that, Stacy, huh? He asked, dusting himself off. How's come they didn't even stop for us? 'Cause they like to see us run, and it ain't our bus, Stacy said, balling his fists and jamming them tightly into his pockets. Well, where's our bus? Demanded Little Man. We ain't got one. Well, why not? Ask Mama, Stacy replied as a tow-headed boy, barefooted and pale, came running down a forest path toward us. The boy quickly caught up and fell in stride with Stacy and TJ. Hey, Stacy, he said shyly. Hey, Jeremy, Stacy said. There was an awkward silence. Y'all just starting school today? Yeah, replied Stacy. I wishin' ours is just starting, sighed Jeremy. Ours has been going on since the end of August. Jeremy's eyes were a whitewashed blue, and they seemed to weep when he spoke. Yeah, said Stacy again. Jeremy kicked the dust briskly and looked toward the north. He was a strange boy. Ever since I had begun school, he had walked with us as far as the crossroads in the morning and met us there in the afternoon. He was often ridiculed by the other children at his school, and had shown up more than once with wide red welts on his arms, which Lillian Jean, his older sister, had revealed with satisfaction were the result of his associating with us. Still, Jeremy continued to meet us. When we reached the crossroads, 3 more children, a girl of 12 or 13, and 2 boys, all looking very much like Jeremy, rushed past. The girl was Lillian Jean. Jeremy, come on, she said without a backward glance, and Jeremy, smiling sheepishly, waved a timid goodbye and slowly followed her. We stood in the crossing, gazing after them. Jeremy looked back once, but then Lillian Jean yelled shrilly at him, and he did not look back again. They were headed for the Jefferson Davis County School, a long, white wooden building looming in the distance. Behind the building was a wide sports field around which were scattered rows of tiered, gray-looking benches. In front of it were 2 yellow buses, our own tormentor and the one that brought students from the other direction, and loitering students awaiting the knell of the morning bell. In the very center of the expansive front lawn, waving red, white, and blue with the emblem of the Confederacy emblazoned in its upper left-hand corner, was the Mississippi flag. Directly below it was the American flag. As Jeremy and his sister and brothers hurried toward those transposed flags, we turned eastward toward our own school. Now, transposed flags, I'm going to make a comment here. The correct order for flags is the American flag at the top and the state flag below it. But this particular school in Mississippi in the South in 1933, that's a long time ago, they had the Confederate flag over the United States flag. So that means that those flags were transposed. So they were in the wrong position. The Great Faith Elementary and Secondary School, one of the largest black schools in the country, was a dismal end to an hour's journey. Consisting of 4 weather-beaten wooden houses on stilts of bricks. 320 students, 7 teachers, a principal, a caretaker, and the caretaker's cow, which kept the wide crabgrass lawn sufficiently clipped in the spring and summer. The school was located near 3 plantations, the largest and closest by far being the Granger plantation. Most of the students were from families that sharecropped on the Granger land, and the others mainly from Montier and Harrison plantation families. Because the students were needed in the fields from early spring when the cotton was planted until after most of the cotton had been picked in the fall, the school adjusted its terms accordingly, beginning in October and dismissing in March. But even so, after today, a number of the older students would not be seen again for a month or two, not until the last puff of cotton had been gleaned from the fields, and eventually most would drop out of school altogether. Because of this, the classes in the higher grades grew smaller with each passing year. The class buildings, with their backs practically against the forest wall, formed a semicircle facing a small one-room church at the opposite edge of the compound. It was to this church that many of the school students and their parents belonged. As we arrived, the enormous iron bell in the church belfry was ringing vigorously, warning the milling students that only 5 minutes of freedom remained. Little Man immediately pushed his way across the lawn to the well. Stacy and TJ, ignoring the rest of us now that they were on school grounds, wandered off to be with the other 7th grade boys. And Christopher John and Claude rushed to reunite with their classmates of last year. Left alone, I dragged slowly to the building that held the first 4 grades and sat on the bottom step. Plopping my pencils and notebook into the dirt, I propped my elbows on my knees and rested my chin in the palms of my hands. "Hey, Cassie," said Mary Lou Wellever, the principal's daughter, as she flounced by in a new yellow dress. "Hey yourself," I said, scowling so ferociously that she kept on walking. I stared after her a moment, noting that she would have on a new dress. Certainly no one else did. Patches on faded pants and dresses abounded on boys and girls, come so recently from the heat of the cotton fields. Girls stood awkwardly, afraid to sit, and boys pulled restlessly at starched, unbuttoned collars. Those students fortunate enough to have shoes hopped from one pinched foot to the other. Tonight, the Sunday clothes would be wrapped in newspaper and hung for Sunday, and the shoes would be packed away to be brought out again only when the weather turned so cold that bare feet could no longer traverse the frozen roads. But for today, we all suffered. On the far side of the lawn, I spied Mo Turner speeding toward the 7th grade class building, and wondered at his energy. Mo was one of Stacy's friends. He lived on the Montier plantation, and a 3.5 hour walk from the school. Because of the distance, many children from the Montier plantation did not come to Great Faith after they had finished the 4-year school near Smellings Creek. But there were some girls and boys like Mo who made the trek daily, leaving their homes while the sky was black and not returning until all was blackness again. I, for one, was certainly glad that I didn't live that far away. I don't think my feet would have wanted that badly for me to be educated. The chiming of the second bell began. I stood up, dusting my bottom as the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th graders crowded up the stairs into the hallway. Little Man flashed proudly past, his face and hands clean, and his black shoes shining again. I glanced down at my own shoes, powdered red, and, raising my right foot, rubbed it against the back of my left leg, then reversed the procedure. As the last gong of the bell reverberated across the compound, I swooped up my pencils and notebook and ran inside. A hallway extended from the front to the back door of the building. On either side of the hallway were 2 doorways, both leading into the same large room, which was divided into two classrooms by a heavy canvas curtain. The second and third grades were on the left, and the first and fourth grades on the right. I hurried to the rear of the building, turned to the right, and slid into a third row bench occupied by Gracie Pearson and Alma Scott. "You can't sit here," objected Gracie. "I'm saving it for Mary Lou." I glanced back at Mary Lou Wellever, depositing her lunch pail on a shelf in the back of the room, and said, "Not any more, you ain't." Miss Daisy Crocker, yellow and buck-eyed, glared down at me from the middle of the room with a look that said, "So it's you, Cassie Logan." Then she pursed her lips and drew the curtain along the rusted iron rod and tucked it into a wide loop in the back wall. With the curtain drawn back, the first graders gazed quizzically at us. Little man sat by a window, his hands folded, patiently waiting for Miss Crocker to speak. Mary Lou nudged me. "That's my seat, Cassie Logan." "Mary Lou Wellever," Miss Crocker called primly. "Have a seat." "Yes, ma'am," said Mary Lou, eyeing me with a look of pure hate before turning away. Miss Crocker walked stiffly to her desk, which was set on a tiny platform and piled high with bulky objects covered by a tarpaulin. She rapped the desk with a ruler, although the room was perfectly still, and said, "Welcome, children, to Great Faith Elementary School." Turning slightly so that she stared squarely at the left side of the room, she continued, "To all of you fourth graders, it's good to have you in my class. I'll be expecting many good and wonderful things from you." Then, addressing the right side of the room, she said, "And to all our little first grade friends, may your tiny feet find the pathways of learning steady and forever before you." Already bored, I stretched my right arm on the desk and rested my head in my upraised hand. Miss Crocker smiled mechanically, then rapped her desk again. "Now, little ones," she said, still talking to first grade, "your teacher, Miss Davis, has been held up in Jackson for a few days, so I'll have the pleasure of sprinkling your little minds with the first rays of knowledge." She beamed down upon them as if she expected to be applauded for this bit of news. Then, with a swoop of her large eyes to include the fourth graders, she went on, "Now, since there's only one of me, we shall have to sacrifice for the next few days. We shall work, work, but we shall have to work like little Christian boys and girls and share. Now, are we willing to do that?" "Yes, Miss Crocker," the children chorused. But I remained silent. I never did approve of group responses. Adjusting my head in my hand, I sighed heavily, my mind on the burning of the berries. "Cassie Logan?" I looked up startled. "Cassie Logan!" "Yes, ma'am." I jumped up quickly to face Miss Crocker. "Aren't you willing to work and share?" "Yes'm." "Then say so." "Yes'm," I murmured, sliding back into my seat as Mary Lou, Gracie, and Alma giggled. Here it was, only 5 minutes into the new school year, and already I was in trouble. By 10 o'clock, Miss Crocker had rearranged our seating and written our names on her seating chart. I was still sitting beside Gracie and Alma, but we had been moved from the third to the first row in front of a small pot-bellied stove. Although being eyeball to eyeball with Miss Crocker was nothing to look forward to, the prospect of being warm once the cold weather set was nothing to be sneezed at either. So I resolved to make the best of my rather dubious position. Now Miss Crocker made a startling announcement. This year we would all have books. Everyone gasped, for most of the students had never handled a book at all besides a family Bible. I admit that even I was somewhat excited. Although Mama had several books, I had never had one of my very own. Now, we're very fortunate to get these readers, Miss Crocker explained, while we eagerly awaited the unveiling. The county superintendent of schools himself brought these books down here for our use, and we must take extra good care of them. She moved toward her desk. So let's all promise that we'll take the best care possible of these new books. She stared down, expecting our response. All right, all together, let's repeat. We promise to take good care of our new books. She looked sharply at me as she spoke. We promise to take good care of our new books. Fine, Miss Crocker beamed, then proudly threw back the tarpaulin. Sitting so close to the desk, I could see that the covers of the books, a motley red, were badly worn, and that the gray edges of the pages had been marred by pencils, crayons, and ink. My anticipation at having my own book ebbed to a sinking disappointment. But Miss Crocker continued to beam as she called each fourth grader to her desk, and recording a number in her roll book, handed him or her a book. As I returned from my trip to her desk, I noticed the first graders anxiously watching the disappearing pile. Miss Crocker must have noticed them too, for I sat down. As I sat down, she said, "Don't worry, little ones. There are plenty of readers for you too. See there on Miss Davis's desk?" Wide eyes turned to the covered teacher's platform directly in front of them, and an audible sigh of relief swelled in the room. I glanced across at little man. His face lit in eager excitement. I knew that he could not see the soiled covers or the marred pages from where he sat, and even though his penchant for cleanliness was often annoying, I did not like to think of his disappointment when he saw the books as they really were. But there was nothing that I could do about it, so I opened my book to its center and began browsing through the spotted pages. Girls with blonde braids and boys with blue eyes stared up at me. I found a story about a boy and his dog lost in a cave, and began reading while Miss Crocker's voice droned on monotonously. Suddenly I grew conscious of a break in that monotonous tone, and I looked up. Miss Crocker was sitting at Miss Davis's desk with the first grade book stacked before her, staring fiercely down at little man who was pushing a book back upon the desk. "What's that you said, Clayton Chester Logan?" she asked. The room became gravely silent. Everyone knew that little man was in big trouble for no one, but no one ever called little man Clayton Chester, unless she or he meant serious business. Little man knew this too. His lips parted slightly as he took his hands from the book. He quivered, but he did not take his eyes from Miss Crocker. I I said, "May I have another book, please, ma'am?" he squeaked. "That one's dirty." "Dirty!" Miss Crocker echoed, appalled by such temerity. She stood up, gazing down upon little man like a bony giant, but little man raised his head and continued looking into her eyes. "Dirty? And just who do you think you are, Clayton Chester? Here, the county is giving us these wonderful books during these hard times, and you're going to stand there and tell me that the book's too dirty? Now you take that book or you get nothing at all." Little man lowered his eyes and said nothing as he stared at the book. For several moments he stood there, his face barely visible above the desk. Then he turned and looked at the few remaining books, and seeming to realize that they were as badly soiled as the one Miss Crocker had given him, he looked across the room at me. I nodded, and little man, glancing up again at Miss Crocker, slid the book from the edge of the desk, and with his back straight and his head up, returned to his seat. Miss Crocker sat down again. Some people around here seem to be giving themselves airs. I'll tolerate no more of that, she scowled. Sharon Lake, come get your book. I watched little man as he scooted into his seat beside two other little boys. He sat for a while with a stony face looking out the window. Then, evidently accepting the fact that the book in front of him was the best that he could expect, he turned and opened it. But as he stared at the book's inside cover, his face clouded, changing from sulky acceptance to puzzlement. His brows furrowed, then his eyes grew wide, and suddenly he sucked in his breath and sprang from his chair like a wounded animal, flinging the book onto the floor and stomping madly upon it. Miss Crocker rushed to little man and grabbed him up in powerful hands. She shook him vigorously and then set him on the floor again. Now, just what's gotten into you, Clayton Chester? But little man said nothing. He just stood staring down at the open book, shivering with indignant anger. Pick it up, she ordered. No, defied little man. No? I'll give you 10 seconds to pick up that book, boy, or I'm going to get my switch. Little man bit his lower lip, and I knew that he was not going to pick up that book. Rapidly I turned to the inside cover of my own book and saw immediately what had made little man so furious. Stamped on the inside cover was a chart which read, Property of the Board of Education, Spokane County, Mississippi, September 1922. Okay, and here is the chart. I'm going to show you a picture of the chart, and I want you to make note of. This is my book, so I'm gonna highlight the problem. 1 second. This is my book. This is most books. You probably don't know this because you don't go to a regular school. But a lot of books, when I was younger, when we got our school books given to us, they had the date that they were issued, what the condition of the book was, and your name. But in this particular county, in this southern state, they also gave the race of the student. And I want you to take note in your book of the column that I have highlighted. In 11 years, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. 1933. This was chronological issuance number 12. The date was September 33. The condition of the book was poor, and the race of the student to receive the book, nigger. Now, before you get all excited about me using that term, you have to remember that in 1933, that was what we called, or that's what Americans called African Americans, niggers. It's not pleasant. It's not correct. but that's what the term was. You're either colored or nigger. Blank lines continued down to line 20, and I knew that they had all been reserved for black students. A knot of anger swelled in my throat and held there. But as Miss Crocker directed little man to bend over the whipping chair, I put aside my anger and jumped up. "Miss Crocker, don't please," I cried. Miss Crocker's dark eyes warned me not to say another word. "I know why he done it." "You want part of this switch, Cassie?" "No," I said hastily. "I just want to tell you how come little man done what he done." "Sit down," she ordered, as I hurried toward her with the open book in my hand. Holding the book up to her, I said, "See, Miss Crocker, see what it says. They give us these old books when they didn't want 'em no more." She regarded me impatiently, but did not look at the book. "Now how could he know what it says? He can't read." "Yes'm, he can. He's been reading since he was 4. He can't read all them big words, but he can read them columns. See what's in the last row? Please look, Miss Crocker." This time Miss Crocker did look, but her face did not change. Then, holding up her head, she gazed unblinkingly down at me. "See what they called us?" I said, afraid she had not seen. "That's what you are," she said coldly. "Now go sit down." I shook my head, realizing now that Miss Crocker did not even know what I was talking about. She had looked at the page and had understood nothing. "I said sit down, Cassie." I started slowly toward my desk, but as the hickory stick sliced the tense air, I turned back around. "Miss Crocker," I said, "I don't want my book either." The switch landed hard upon little man's upturned bottom. Miss Crocker looked questioningly at me as I reached up to her desk and placed the book upon it. Then she swung the switch 5 more times, and discovering that little man had no intention of crying, she ordered him up. "All right, Cassie," she sighed, turning to me. "Come on and get yours." By the end of the school day I had decided that I would tell Mama everything before Miss Crocker had a chance to do so. From 9 years of trial and error, I had learned that punishment was always less severe when I poured out the whole truth to Mama on my own before she had heard anything from anyone else. I knew that Miss Crocker had not spoken to Mama during the lunch period, for she had spent the whole hour in the classroom preparing for the afternoon session. As soon as class was dismissed, I sped from the room, weaving a path through throngs of students, happy to be free. But before I could reach the 7th grade class building, I had the misfortune to collide with Mary Lou's father. Mr. Wellever looked down on me with surprise that I would actually bump into him, then proceeded to lecture me on the virtues of watching where one was going. Meanwhile, Miss Crocker briskly crossed the lawn to Mama's class building. By the time I escaped Mr. Wellever, she had already disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Mama's classroom was in the back. I crept silently along the quiet hall and peeped cautiously into the open doorway. Mama, pushing a strand of her long, crinkly hair back into the chignon at the base of her slender neck, was seated at her desk watching Miss Crocker thrust a book before her. "Look at that, Mary," Miss Crocker said, thumping the book twice with a forefinger. "A perfectly good book ruined. Look at that broken binding and those footmarks all over it." Mama did not speak as she studied the book. "And here's the one Cassie wouldn't take," she said, placing a second book on Mama's desk with an outraged slam. "At least she didn't have a tantrum and stamp all over hers. I tell you, Mary, I just don't know what got into those children today. I always knew Cassie was rather high strung, but little man, he's always such a perfect little gentleman." Mamma glanced at the book I had rejected and opened the front cover so the offensive pages of both books faced her. You say Cassie said it was because of this front page that she and little man didn't want the books? Mamma asked quietly. Yes, ain't that something? Miss Crocker said, forgetting her teacher training school diction in her indignation. The very idea. That's on all the books, and why they got so upset about it, I'll never know. You punished them? Asked Mamma, glancing up at Miss Crocker. Well, I certainly did. Whipped both of them good with my hickory stick, wouldn't you have? When Mamma did not reply, she added defensively, I had a perfect right to. Of course you did, Daisy, Mamma said, turning back to the books again. They disobeyed you. But her tone was so quiet and non-committal that I knew Miss Crocker was not satisfied with her reaction. Well, I thought you would have wanted to know, Mary, in case you want to give them a piece of your mind also. Mamma smiled up at Miss Crocker and said rather absently, Yes, of course, Daisy, thank you. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out some paper, a pair of scissors, and a small brown bottle. Miss Crocker, dismayed by Mamma's seeming unconcern for the seriousness of the matter, thrust her shoulders back and began moving away from the desk. You understand that if they don't have those books to study from, I'll have to fail them both in reading and composition, since I plan to base all my lessons around. She stopped abruptly and stared in amazement at Mamma. Mary, what in the world are you doing? Mamma did not answer. She had trimmed the paper to the size of the books and was now dipping a gray-looking glue from the brown bottle onto the inside cover of one of the books. Then she took the paper and placed it over the glue. Mary Logan, do you know what you're doing? That book belongs to the county. If somebody from the superintendent's office ever comes down here and sees that book, you'll be in real trouble. Mamma laughed and picked up the other book. In the first place, no one cares enough to come down here. And in the second place, if anyone should come, maybe he could see all the things we need. Current books for all of our subjects, not just somebody's old throwaways, desks, paper, blackboards, erasers, maps, chalk. Her voice trailed off as she glued the second book. Biting the hand that feeds you. That's what you're doing, Mary Logan. Biting the hand that feeds you. Again, Mamma laughed. If that's the case, Daisy, I don't think I need that little bit of food. With the second book finished, she stared at a small pile of seventh-grade books on her desk. Well, I just think you're spoiling those children, Mary. They've got to learn how things are sometime. Maybe so, said Mamma, but that doesn't mean they have to accept them. And maybe we don't either. Miss Crocker gazed suspiciously at Mamma. Although Mamma had been a teacher at Great Faith for 14 years, ever since she had graduated from the Crandon Teacher Training School at 19, she was still considered by many of the other teachers as a disrupting maverick. Her ideas were always a bit too radical, and her statements a bit too pointed. The fact that she had not grown up in Spokane County, but in the Delta, made her even more suspect, and the more traditional thinkers like Miss Crocker were wary of her. Well, if anyone ever does come from the county and sees Cassie and little man's books messed up like that, she said, I certainly won't accept the responsibility for them. It'll be easy enough for anyone to see whose responsibility it is, Daisy, by opening any seventh-grade book, because tomorrow I'm going to mess them up too. Miss Crocker, finding nothing else to say, turned imperiously and headed for the door. I dashed across the hall and awaited her exit, then crept back. Mamma remained at her desk, sitting very still. For a long time she did not move. When she did, she picked up one of the seventh-grade books and began to glue again. I wanted to go and help her, but something warned me that now was not the time to make my presence known, and I left. I would wait until the evening to talk to her. There was no rush now. She understood. And that's the end of chapter 1 of Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. This is an excellent book, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and grant you His peace. Bye.